Well, good morning, everybody. It is January 6th, Kraken Day, the day when Congress will certify or not certify the votes of the Electoral College. As I record this, it appears that the Republicans have lost one of the two seats for the Georgia Senate, and the other one is razor thin. And as I record this, the Democrat has a slight lead. And okay. One of the things that was so cathartic for me yesterday, and I'm afraid I'm going to have to just continue to beat this drum because it's comforting to me and it's predictive for me, and hopefully it'll be the same for you. And that is, there's somebody said, if you want to know the future, look to the past, study the past. And I think the analogy of Pearl Harbor and the first several months, in fact, I think the entire war in the Pacific is a great analogy for what we're going through and about to go through, just getting started on. And one of the things that was, as a historian, something you read about and you can kind of connect to it, but you don't really emotionally feel it in your guts. And that is just the sense of utter despair that followed Pearl Harbor, where it wasn't just the catastrophe of Pearl Harbor, but the Japanese advances just kept going. There was no stopping them. You're knocked on your heels. You're stunned and dazed and angry and furious and feeling impotent, and you want to bomb somebody, you want to get in the game, and you can't. And not only is that shock behind you, but the shocks continue to come. They just keep coming. It's like getting a multiple jabs. It's like a combination. You're up against the ropes and you're just getting battered, and you think, God, how long can I hold on here? Well, the answer is you can hang on as long as you can hang on for. And for me, that's pretty much forever. So with these current situation in Georgia, we're gonna assume, for the sake of the argument today, that means a loss of the Senate, which means the loss of the circuit breaker, and that means that the Democrats will have stolen the presidency and likely stolen both the House and the Senate. I don't think they were prepared for just the fact that the Republicans gained so many seats in the House is another clear, irrefutable indication that the presidency was stolen. But we're not going to deal with that right now. Today's topic is law abiding, and the tag for the show today is they've got your number and they know you better than you know yourself. So before we get into the details of that, let's do a little quick quiz, shall we? Those of you who are up on your zoology might have some answers for this one. I'll make it real quick. I won't spend too much time with this. So my questions for you are, what is the deepest diving animal on Earth? Now my second question is, what is the highest flying animal on Earth? I'd like to know what the fastest animal on land is, what the fastest flying animal is, which animal lives in the hottest climate, and which animal lives in the coldest. Those are the zoological questions I'm asking. Turns out, just as a hint, it's a mammal in all of those 6 cases. Okay, here comes the answer. The deepest diving mammal is the human. The highest flying animal is the human. The fastest land animal is the human. The fastest flyer is the human. The creature most capable of living in extremely hot temperatures are human beings, and the creature that is most capable of living in extremely cold temperatures is also the human being. And we achieve all of this, people think, because of our intelligence, and that's what makes it possible, but basically it's the plasticity of our species that allows us to dominate this planet in the way that we have. We can do just about anything. We have enough technology, even if it's just bear skins and stone knives and bear skins and fire, to do all of these things. So what does this have to do with politics? Well, it's ridiculous to assume that a species that is as plastic as we are, is able to adapt to so many different environments, would have one kind of species psychological strategy. Now, for those of you who are longtime observers of the Stratosphere Lounge, I can hear you already taking your shot glasses out and pouring yourselves a shot. We're not going to get into that today. We will in the near future. But today, as a prelude to the topic, which is law-abiding citizens, I just want to mention that mammals, virtually all of them, and to some degree reptiles as well, even bacteria, as a matter of fact, but generally speaking, mammals have evolved 2 different strategies for surviving, for passing on their genes, for reproducing, but basically it means for survival. What nature has equipped us to do is survive. That's what it wants us to do. It wants us to survive long enough to have children anyway. After that, it doesn't care about us. I'm talking about biology. I'm not talking about God or anything like that. So for a species that can occupy so many different niches in the environment, you would think that there would be multiple psychological strategies depending on what that environment is. And you'd be absolutely right. I'm going to save the details of this for a later show, an important show, if you haven't heard these two letters before. But these two basic strategies are considered R and K, and we're not going to get into R and K today. But to make a long story short, a very, very long story short, human beings have evolved two different psychological methods of survival, and it usually depends on their environment. One method is very much bound by law. And a good example of this kind of animal would be wolves, which have an elaborate social structure, which are dangerous because they've got sharp fangs and serious claws. And since when they fight, it is such a fatal proposition, they have built into them automatic surrender motives. In other words, if two wolves are fighting and one wolf realizes, you know what, I'm getting my butt kicked here. If a wolf stops fighting and shows his throat, you would think that the other wolf, which is completely adrenalized and just fighting to the death, would tear its throat out. But that's not what happens. Once one of these animals shows a sign of submission, then the aggression in the animal that's won the fight is turned off immediately. It's a switch. He doesn't have to go walk it off. He doesn't have to calm down. He doesn't have to, count to 10. No. Once that submission signal is there, the wolf is hardwired to stop fighting instantly. And that's in order to protect the wolf species, because if you didn't, there wouldn't be any wolves. There'd be one wolf left. And you want a strong alpha wolf, but you need other ones as well. So that's built into that kind of an animal. And that kind of a psychology is built into certain kinds of human beings, which we would call conservatives. The other strategy is basically one of unlimited green pastures, where there are so many resources, or predation is so high. In any event, the other strategy is the R strategy, and that's the reproductive strategy. That's a strategy of saying, we're not going to spend time raising our kids because, frankly, a rabbit who's really completely buffed out and cut and goes to the gym 4 or 5 hours a day doesn't have an evolutionary advantage over a rabbit that doesn't do any of these things. And that's because rabbits eat grass, and investing in the quality of the rabbit, investing in a alpha rabbit, is a waste of time for rabbits. You don't need it. The time that rabbit is spending in the gym, bulking up and making himself into super hair, could be better spent eating the grass out there, because it's not going to make any difference. With wolves, it's very different. Very scarce food. You need skilled predators and so on. Now, I'll get into all of this later, and for those of you who are wondering where I'm going with this, I'm going someplace very, very important. These two psychologies are built into human individuals, and they're built into cultures. And sometimes in times of hardship, in times of growth, in times of cooperation, that wolf-like strategy, the K strategy, is adopted by large numbers of humans. Human societies become more like wolves. They're more cooperative, they're more social, they're more definitely restricted by laws and hierarchies and traditions and customs and so on. And then as resources get greater and greater and greater, and it begins to look like the world is no longer a place where you have to go out and hunt and compete, now it's just an endless field of clover, then the entire human race switches to what makes sense when there's great abundance, and that's the R strategy. Don't waste time on creating better children, because better children is a waste of time. Just go out and make something that eats, just like everything else. And we find ourselves moving into that time with a great deal of rapidity, and that's what this election is showing. So again, stay with me. I'm asking you to stay with me here, because if you understand this, you will understand the source of our problems and really the only way out of our problems. Conservatives are wired for K. That's why they call themselves conservatives. That's why they select themselves as conservatives. That's why conservative politicians appeal to them. They appeal to their sense of independence. They appeal to their sense of self-reliance, their willingness to defend themselves, their willingness to work hard to improve their own lot. They're not terribly concerned about what the other people are doing. What they really want to do is they want to be left alone, and they want to maximize their potential so that they can go out into a world and succeed through competition. liberals are the liberal philosophy, progressive philosophy, is a reflection of the R strategy, which is essentially saying there are endless supplies of everything. There's endless money. We'll just print more if we want to. We can be as promiscuous as we want. We can do whatever we want to. We don't have to abide by any laws. Rabbits don't have that built-in. They don't have that built-in surrender mechanism and that built-in cutoff, because two rabbits fighting each other, unless one's in front of the cave of Canark or whatever from Monty Python, two rabbits, they don't fight each other. So they don't need it. They don't need to be wired to be shut down by a social cue like a pair of fighting wolves would. Lions, all of the main predators have this quality when they're a K-type species. Now we get to the point. Now we get to the actual point. I said at the beginning that our political opponents have our number and they understand us better than we do. And I used to despair of the fact, or at the very least I used to bitch about the fact, that so few conservatives really understand progressive objectives. I used to think this was like a great defect. Well, what's the matter with you? Well, why would they ruin California? Why would they chase businesses out of California, conservative would say. Don't they understand that it's businesses that create the tax base that creates all these social services? Why on earth would they do that? I mean, if they want a social utopia, they kind of need to keep the businesses here, right? That's a common sense answer. And it is the kind of thing that used to drive me nuts and now actually fills me with a really special kind of warmth. Because what that tells me, what this conservative naivete, and that's the only word for it, tells me is that the vast bulk of people who are Trump supporters or conservatives or whatever, people watching this show, are so fundamentally honest and fundamentally decent that they simply cannot conceive of people who would do things that are unlawful and dishonest. We have a mental understanding that they exist, but the entire motivation is so alien to us that we simply cannot put ourselves in their shoes. And since we can't make ourselves think like the enemy thinks, we're constantly surprised when the enemy pulls these kind of strategies out that anybody who studies who we're fighting would know is exactly what they do. We feel that it is better to lose by the rules than to cheat to win. We feel that because we're good at competing. We feel that because we understand that losing is not the end of the world, and we understand that in losing you can learn lessons so that you don't lose next time. So we are bound by laws. We're bound by rules. We're wired to be. It's in our biology. It's in our psychological biology. Conservatives are wired to obey the law for the same reason that wolves are wired to obey the law, because they're fundamentally dangerous creatures, and there needs to be a set of rules to keep the wolves from tearing each other up. But animals like rabbits don't have any of these rules. They don't have any inhibitions. There's no private property for rabbits. Rabbits don't really have territory. They simply go out and they eat, and then they come back and they make as many kids as they can, and they go out and they eat. They have no built-in social structure. They don't nurture their young for lives. You know, they don't pair bond. They don't do any of these things. It's a waste of time for them. And this is the psychology that we're facing now. And so when I say they've got our number, and that they know us better than we do, they know us better than we know ourselves, I'm convinced that they've known this for a long time, and I'm 100% convinced that all of the data gathering, every single mouse click you've made, at least in the last 20 years and probably longer, every single mouse click you've ever made, every time you've looked at one of these videos, every time you've gone to look at a report on National Review or Instapoint, every single mouse click you've ever made has been recorded. And you may say to yourself, because you're thinking like an honest person, you're thinking like a predator, like a wolf, you're thinking they're doing that so that they can get something on me. You're thinking like an individual. You're thinking like an individual. When you hear these things, your immediate response is, those bastards are trying to amass information on me so they can come after me. They want something on me. But that's not what's happening. I'm convinced that's not what's happening. They're not interested in you as an individual. They're very interested in you as a conservative, very interested. And why they collect all of this data and why it's analyzed by artificial intelligences is not so they can find something on you. It's the smallest of small potatoes. That came hard to me, thinking that I was public enemy number one for the left, but they don't give a damn what I do or say. Actually, all they care about is how I behave and how I fit into the tens of millions, hundreds of millions of other conservatives in the country and how we behave. That's what they're interested in. How do we behave as a political group, as a group of people who identify with a certain set of values? And what they see, and what the Democratic politicians see, is they see a political group, the conservatives, a kind of person to whom the law is paramount and will obey the law because that's what honest people do. They are law-abiding citizens. And they know that we are law-abiding citizens. And they also know that anything that has a veneer, just a veneer of law over it, we are primed to accept. We are biologically wired to accept something if it shows the signs of the codes that we have come to live by. And this may sound paradoxical to you, but the codes of honor that in our case call for fair elections, they can cheat on an election, and we can know they've cheated on an election. But the fact that it's going through the legal channels, certified by the Electoral College, Supreme Court doesn't want to deal with it. All of these legal structures that we put in to guide our lives and keep balance. Once a lie goes through those factory stations and comes out the other end, it's still a lie, but it's a lie that's wrapped in a veneer of lawfulness. And that disarms us in the same way that a wolf will stop attacking another wolf once it sends a certain signal. Once the superior wolf receives that social cue, baring its throat in that particular example, there are many, many others, then the wolf instantly changes its behavior. And the left knows this about us. They know that we are law-abiding citizens, and they know that because we're law-abiding citizens, there are some things that we are almost incapable of doing. And the thing that we are most incapable of doing is willfully breaking the law. And if you don't understand this, you're going to have a tough couple of years ahead of you. We're going to have a tough couple of years ahead of us anyway. But if you don't understand this, then you can't understand the conflict. You can't understand the board. We come with a certain set of weapons. They come with a certain set of weapons. We need to understand what their weapons are. We need to understand how their weapons affect us so that we can put up reliable defenses against the weapons that they have. And just because we don't understand those weapons doesn't mean they're not real and doesn't mean they're not powerful. The inbound, wired sense of honor, trust, loyalty, decency, for all of these qualities, all of these virtues, and that's important to remember, determine our behavior, and we're bound by them. And the left is not bound by any of them. And we can't understand that. We really can't. So in answer to the question about the California politicians, I spent years bashing my head against this. How can they not see that by raising taxes and regulations, they're driving all the taxpayers out of the state? They're going to bankrupt the state. How can they not see that? I spent 10 years trying to understand how they could be that stupid. And then suddenly, like a lightning bolt, it just all became clear to me. Of course they understand they're ruining the state. Of course they know that they're destroying the economy of California. They just don't care. They don't care because right now they're getting paid. They're eating. They're out there in the clover and they're munching down. And if you tell a rabbit, if you overeat this field, there's not going to be any food for rabbits. So your next generation of rabbits are going to starve. A rabbit's going to say, I don't even know the names of my kids. I don't know how many I have. Let me know if any of this sounds familiar, by the way. I don't know how many rabbits I've fostered out there. I don't care. I'm eating. That's all I care about. I'm making more rabbits. If there's no clover for them, then that's their problem. It's not my problem. Animals like wolves have to be invested in their children because wolves have to be able to compete for scarce resources. So we're bound by laws. We're law-abiding citizens. And I hate to be the person to say this because just like you, it goes against every instinct I have. It goes against all of the inbound codes of honor and all of those words that mean everything to us and mean nothing to them. It's important to understand, by the way, very important to understand, that the left looks at us in the same kind of amazement that we look at them with. We look at stealing an election, and the thought of it is so horrific to us. It's so outrageous. It's so monumentally, elementally wrong. It's wrong on a molecular level for us. It is wrong in our genes. It's just plain wrong. We cannot understand how somebody would be willing to do that. Their problem is a much easier problem, short term. All of their advantages are short-term advantages. All of our disadvantages are short-term disadvantages. The long game belongs to us, but we got to be prepared to play the long game. They look at us and they think, they're amazed, is what they are. They're amazed. To us, to them rather, we're kind of like coming across an ATM. We're just walking down the street minding our own business, and we look over and there's an ATM, and it's just shooting $20 bills out, shooting them out to the street. And I'm not really even talking about money here so much as I'm talking about the attitude. Just dumping $20 bills out as fast as they can. So what they do is they run over to this ATM and they start pocketing the cash, and they kind of make sure nobody else is seeing it either. And they will pocket every single dollar that comes out of that machine until the machine stops spitting out money. And they look at this as a tremendous boon, an incredible, unbelievable break for them. While you and I would look at this and we would go inside the bank and say, hey, your ATM is malfunctioning, here's your money back. They look at us as if we're idiots. In their value system, they cannot comprehend what I just said. Cannot comprehend that somebody could see an ATM spitting out thousands of dollars every minute, and that a person wouldn't take the money and would in fact turn off that spigot and return the money to the people who it belonged to. Inconceivable to them. Inconceivable. They cannot understand it. But they do know, and they have been studying forever, and I am 100% convinced of this. And if you want to get deeper into this particular subject, you might want to check out my firewall called Stoners and Reptiles to find out the mindset of these big tech companies, all of these big politicians and all the rest of it. So they are depending on our law-abidingness to disarm us mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, all of those things. They know, they're not guessing, they know, I think, to many decimal places, exactly how much we will take, and I think they're able to tweak this, and I think they are in constant monitoring of the emails we send to each other, the articles, videos like this one. They're monitoring our temperature, and their response is being very carefully adjusted to make sure that we stay underneath that point at which we break through this law-abiding set of rules, and then the game's over for them. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this example because I've used it so many times, but when the Marines first encountered the Japanese, they treated them honorably, and when they surrendered, they took them as prisoner. And they went out to take care of their wounded, and a Japanese soldier who's calling for medics, 2 corpsmen show up and a couple of other soldiers, and he pulls a grenade and blows up and kills everybody. And when this happens enough, time after time after time, doesn't take a long time, to realize that these people are not fighting, these Japanese soldiers are not fighting on the same code that we're fighting on. And if we continue to follow our code, then we're going to lose. So the Marines in the Pacific became as brutal as the Japanese they were facing because they were forced to. They had no choice. They had to, or else you lose. For us, because of the heroism of the men that died in the Pacific and fought in the Pacific and all the rest of us and gave us this free country, our challenge is not a physical one. It's not, we're not, I foresee no future where there are people shooting at each other in America, at least not in any real numbers like in a civil war. I can see rioting in cities and people defending their properties, but this giant army of 70 million people with their own AR-15s, I just don't think it's in the cards for a number of reasons that we'll deal with later. So we have to understand, as before, that what we're doing in this cold civil war is we are fighting a war of psychology. It's a war of influence. It's a war of understanding how we think and setting the situation up so that we cripple ourselves with our own built-in social inhibitors. But now we get to the fun part. If we can break through this, all of a sudden, it's over for them. I know that sounds like a large statement, but think about it. If this Georgia thing goes the way it looks like it's going to go, and if President Kamala Harris and a Democratic House and a Democratic Senate start passing all kinds of tax laws, all kinds of regulations, all kinds of things that we know are destructive. They start demanding that we do this, demanding that we do that, all of those things. We're going to do it because we're law-abiding citizens. But if you believe, as I believe, that this government was not lawfully elected, then that unlocks something in our heads. Now, we're not really talking about law-abiding because these bastards broke the law in order to get into power. We don't have an agreement with them anymore. That agreement that we would obey the will of the majority only applies when we have a pretty realistic sense that it was in fact the majority that spoke. And in my mind, and in your mind too, there's no question, none, that the majority of America voted for Donald Trump and that these people stole it. And since they stole it, they are not entitled to our law abidingness. Our honor response does not apply to these people. Not because they're Democrats, but because they're thieves. It does not apply to them. And we have to get it into our heads that it does not apply to them. And when I say, if that ever becomes widely known among conservatives, if it ever becomes really clear the actual power they have over us, then it's finished for them. And what I mean by that is this. If every single person, if let's say 100 million people voted for Donald Trump or supported him or had family members or whatever, if every single one of those people decided not to obey their miserable commie laws, and they did it at the same time, what are they going to do about that? They're going to arrest all of us? Who are they going to send to arrest us? They're going to send Antifa, who curls up Commander Red on Antifa, goes to burn things, smash things. Finally, he's arrested, curls up in the fetal position, starts to cry. They're going to send those people after us? If we, as an entire political movement, understand that we're not talking about resistance now, we're talking about open rebellion. And now we get to something that we're going to talk about tomorrow, because it's too important to just cram here in the last couple minutes of this today. Rebellion is treason. And treason is not something that sits well with us. We don't want to be traitors. We look at the flag and we say, no matter what this flag is doing, I'm loyal to it. But treason is only treason. Let me put it this way. Treason stops becoming treason and becomes rebellion when you declare. That's why the Declaration of Independence was a moral necessity. Because once the American colonies declared, then it's not treason anymore. We are not treasonous to the laws of the king because we no longer recognize the king. This is a separate country now. And when we get to that point, when we get to the point when we realize that this government and all of the things that we're wired to accept as authority and that we're wired to obey because of our respect for the rule of law, all of this is about the rule of law. The reason we're so angry is because the rule of law has been destroyed. We see all these people getting away with all of these crimes and nothing's done about it. We're filled with outrage. We're outraged because the law is not being enforced. And that actual mental process is what is shackling us to them. They understand that about us and they use it with tremendous skill. And they throw words at us like peaceful transfer of power and all the rest of these things. And it disarms us. We feel, oh, well, do I really want to? No. We don't owe this government anything. If this goes through, and today's cracking day, I don't know how it's going to happen. I really don't. But if this actually goes through, we don't have a deal anymore. The social contract is broken, and you broke it. We agreed to be ruled by you and to be governed by your laws if two things happen. Number one, we get to select who you are. Number two, you have to play by the same rules we do. And you've broken both of those rules. And not just once, you've broken them repeatedly, brazenly, and ever more aggressively. And we don't have a deal with you anymore. You're not our government anymore. We don't recognize, it's not a question of not recognizing Joe Biden. I don't recognize the federal government. When I say recognize it, I mean it in both terms. I don't recognize it to the degree that it is not the law-abiding government that I grew up under. I don't recognize the FBI, which I used to consider a crime-fighting organization rather than a crime-manufacturing organization. I used to trust the news because they used to provide information. Now their job is to suppress it. I don't recognize any of that. But when I say I don't recognize this government, I mean it in the legal sense. I am not willing to grant this group of criminals official recognition. I'm not willing to put them into the honor code. I don't owe them anything. I don't owe them honorable behavior. I certainly don't owe them obedience. I don't owe them cooperation. I don't owe them anything. And if they stole this government, from honorable people. And if they did that, if they committed that crime and used our goodness and our decency and our law abidingness against us, then not only do I not owe them any obedience or anything, what I owe is I owe the people who are with me in being victimized by this crime. I owe it to myself and to my ancestors and to our children and everybody else, to God, to nature, to the founding fathers, to generations yet unborn. We owe them the moral obligation to overthrow this illegal government. I've never said this before because it's never been true before. I've never said that this government is illegal before. I've only said I don't like them. I don't like what they're doing. But as a K-type person, they legally won, at least we thought so. So I'm forced to abide by the rules. But if this goes through, I'm not. Now my obligation is to make sure that this thing comes crashing down. And that's something we can talk about the details of later. This program is made possible by the members at BillWhittle.com. Consistently, these videos are getting 15,000 views. And we had a significant number of people, 1,000 people or more, stepped up recently. But that still basically means that, I don't know, 1 out of 5, 1 out of 6 of the people watching these videos are actually paying for them. If you believe in the message, and if you believe in capitalism, and you believe in free trade and fair trade, if these videos are worth something to you, then all I'm asking you to do is to live up to your end of the bargain and make some kind of a contribution. We love members not just because it keeps this membership going, keeps this business going, but we love members because the more members we get, the stronger we become as a group. The interaction among the members is amazing, and the single great honor of my career by 100 miles is the quality of the people that watch the show. So, just something to think about. The link is right below there in the description. We'll be back tomorrow. We'll know what happened to the challenge to the electoral college votes by then, and we'll pick up this thread of lawlessness, treason, rebellion, social contracts, and all the rest of it. These are the foundational things that we're going to have to understand before we can get down to the strategic moves, and then the strategic moves will determine the tactical moves that we're going to execute in order to recover our country. Recover our government. The country can't go away because the country lives inside our heads. I'm Bill Whittle. We'll see you tomorrow.